Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the October 2017 Nextier Power Dialogue with the theme Power Sector Reform, My Reflections and Way Forward. My name is Patrick Okibo. I'm Principal Partner Nextier. Nextier is a public policy advisory firm and think tank. While our work in the power sector happens to be the most visible, we do a lot of work in many other areas, including governance, job creation, security and conflict resolution, investment promotion. This monthly dialogue series holds every third Wednesday of the month, and it's an initiative of Nextier Power. There are three core objectives of these sessions. One is to share ideas about key issues in the Nigerian electricity market. Two is to create a platform for advocacy, to input ideas into the programs and initiatives of the government. And three is to create a platform for networking for business opportunities. Today we're excited to be hosting three former ministers of power. I probably can boldly claim that this has never happened in Nigeria before. But that's not the fact we're most proud of. Rather, we're most proud of the fact that we convinced these distinguished gentlemen to present themselves to this erudite audience and to share their reflections on their tenure as ministers and the lessons they've learned and how we can apply these lessons and ideas to the current administration. The objective of this event is not to point fingers. It's not to say who did what or who didn't do what. Rather, it's to create a safe space for us to learn from their reflections as we think about the challenges in the sector. Anyone who's fought in the arena understands what Theodore Roosevelt meant when he said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcomings, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails, while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls, who neither know victory nor defeat." So, friends, these men were in the arena. As you can see from the agenda, in a few seconds I'll introduce each of the panelists, although they need no introduction. And I'll invite them to present their opening remarks. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes to present. After the presentations, we will engage in about 30 minutes moderated discussion. Dr. Larry Babalola was the Honorable Minister of Power from 2008 to 2010, had a PhD in energy economics from the University of Surrey. Earlier in his career, he was an investment banker with a focus on infrastructure. Under the USAID and World Bank program, Dr. Babalola was responsible for reform measures in the power sector, including setting up the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. He later led the power sector team at BPE before he was co-opted into the economic advisory team of the late President Omar Yar'Adua. He's a highly sought-after advisor to many companies and governments across the region. Please, a round of applause. To not know Professor Bat Nnaji is to not know anything about the power sector. Or maybe you just landed from China. He was the Minister of Power from 2012 to 2013, but prior to that, he was a special advisor to the President on power from 2011. He's a professor of mechanical and industrial engineering and is widely respected for his works on automation and robotics at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. He's the founder and chairman of the first indigenous privately owned power company, Geometric Power. And I saw a tidbit I didn't know about him, which I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm still sharing. That he was the presidential aspirant. Cancel.
I want to read this right now.
Yes.
There's someone from Imo State that has the same last name as me. So unfortunately, he ran for president in some party. I have no idea. I don't know him, never met him. But everybody keeps thinking it's me. Please, okay. I did not run.
Excellent. A round of applause for Professor Black. Professor Chinedu Nebo was the Honorable Minister of Power from 2013 to 2015. He's a professor of meteorological engineering and materials engineering. Prior to his tenure as minister, Professor Nebo served meritoriously as Deputy Vice Chancellor at Enugu State University of Technology. He was Vice Chancellor of the Federal University Oye Ekiti and Vice Chancellor of my alma mater, which happens to be the only university in Nigeria. Yes. University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He successfully repositioned that university as one of the best run universities in Nigeria. He was also on the board of the Niger Delta Power Holding Company prior to his appointment as Honorable Minister. You may not know this, or maybe you do, but he's also an Archdeacon of the Anglican community. A round of applause for him. So like I said, we'll take quick comments, opening remarks from the ministers. Each of them will spend about 10 minutes. And I think it's best to start from the minister who's had the longest time to reflect on his tenure. So permit me to invite my good friend, Dr. Lanre Babalola, to make his opening remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here this evening and talk about the power sector. I have failed. I can say so categorically because at the last minute I got an email from Patrick saying that I'll have no more than 10 minutes to speak this evening, and I tried very hard to condense my paper to within 10 minutes plus or minus a few minutes, but I still failed. So I have failed, I will fail. Please, if I'm so kindly permitted, I'd like to go through this paper. It's a little bit long, but because of my involvement in the power sector reform program from the beginning, I think I have some inside information which some of my colleagues have been not privy to. So I think on that, I'd like to be granted that indulgence. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening once again. When the organizers of this event called me to extend an invitation and secure my willingness to participate, what was meant to be a very short phone call, knowing Patrick, a friend of mine whom I couldn't say no to, the phone call became very protracted. I went on for more than 30 minutes. And the reason was very simple. My initial inquiry into the purpose and objective of this event led to a very expansive conversation ranging from the genesis of reform, goals and objectives, implementation framework, the various actors, BP, NCP, NEPA, Ministry, National Assembly, and so on and so forth. During the conversation, it became very clear to me that this event It's absolutely necessary and timely. And for the start of this conversation, let me commend the efforts of Nextier. It is, however, instructive to note that there were many more players that shaped the reform than us, the former ministers here gathered this evening. I'll say one or two around the room. I think it would be appropriate if, and I want you to consider this, if this develops into a serial, if this is developed into a serial roundtable discussion that bring together all the players to elucidate issues, challenges, rationale, and sometimes behind the scene arguments without prejudice to confidentiality, of course, to shed more light on decisions that ultimately shaped the reform. In addition to putting this in proper context and perspective, it will, in my mind, enrich policy formulation and also academic research. As I said, 10 minutes I consider to be grossly insufficient to tackle the myriad of issues. So I'll give an excuse for myself in case I run beyond the allotted time. Justice requires a much longer session for that. But without much ado, let me turn my attention to the purpose of this event, namely share my thoughts on the state of the sector, the reform, and what else can be done to improve on it. For the purpose of this presentation, I've split my presentation into 3 sections. The first, background and impetus for reform. The second, reform implementation, achievements and challenges, and third, reflections and thoughts. On background and impetus for reform, the question that should exercise our minds is, what were the issues that gave impetus to the reform? Without a doubt, at the time and even up to now, people were fed up. And to a large extent, they still remain fed up regarding power supply in the country. I'm fed up. The amount of money I spend on electricity, buying credit, and buying diesel, to the extent I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday to perhaps move towards renewable energy, completely disconnect myself from the system. So that's the level of emotions that run through the power sector. It's instructive to note that the pitch to secure the buy-in of stakeholders into the reform was the GSM revolution, which was largely very successful. People, as I said, were fed up with not just no power today, the erratic supply, the inconsistency was the major problem, not just for residential customers, but also industrial customers as well. And if GSM could deliver improved services within a space of a year of rollout, why not the power reform? And it was, yes, we can. The reform, in the minds of most people, will not only address the vexed question of NEPA and the derisive adage of never expect power always, but will lead to quantum transformation of our living conditions and economic development. Contrary to what a lot of people think, the causes and failings of the power sector actually are more rooted in economics than administration and governance. So it's more a case of, if once you can get government out of things, everything will move. If nothing else, some of us came to appreciate that administration and governance were allowed to completely subsume the structure, conduct, and performance of the industry. And as I said, people thinking that once you can move government, the whole thing has happened in telecoms, it will be nirvana, power forever. With some disappointment, we've come to realize that this is far from the case. The question then is, what makes power uniquely different to GSM that it has failed to live up to expectations? First, those of you familiar with the sector or have come to understand it will agree with me that electricity is a little bit more complex than GSM or telecoms in terms of technology, the equipment, and not as modular as you have in telecoms, competitiveness, different, be competing for the market or in the market, the industry structure from discrete to non-discrete value chain, no one utility except in some cases, which is what we're trying to get away from, where they have the whole value chain under its control. The technical characteristics of power, instantaneous demand and supply. Once you generate, you must use it. If you put on your gen and you burn all the diesel, you don't put on one light bulb, the tank will empty. And different gestation periods, payback, everything. So the commonalities are not as big as the differences. In addition, the form and content of reform was informed by global best practice. The world had come to accept that power was not entirely monopolistic, that different countries had undertaken reform to improve technical, allocative, and distributional efficiencies. Depending on starting point and contentious issues and efficiencies, different models were prescribed. Some countries deregulated, others re-regulated, but ultimately it was about promoting efficiency, competition, and choice. Why was a holistic reform adopted instead of something not as encompassing? Thank you, Patrick. Before talking about the nature of the reform, it is noteworthy to highlight the fact that it is not the first time that the reform power sector went through major reform. Electricity was first commercially generated in Nigeria in 1896 by the Power Works Department. What characterized the period was proliferation of small, often isolated power plants. The first restructuring happened with the establishment of the Electricity Corporation of Nigeria in 1951 and was further consolidated with the establishment of NDA in 1962. With this effectively centralized power supply in Nigeria. In 1972, with the establishment of NEPA and domiciliation of various functions of the power sector, production and supply in the new utility NEPA, to effect better planning, despite it said where the sector once again witnessed a major structural change. This conferred monopoly status on NEPA. The big and beautiful model gained currency extensively to exploit economies of scale and scope for the benefits of customers and consumers in Nigeria. Unfortunately, utilities like NEPA that existed in a weak governance environment exhibited all the negative elements of monopoly with the attendant deleterious consequences on power supply. So, for us, monopolization did not improve power supply. Another false start. The determination to address this problem led to the next episode of reform in 1998, which came by way of privatization and commercialization of NEPA with amendments to NEPA and Electricity Act. The sum total of this reform was the removal of the jury monopoly status of NEPA, but did very little to change the de facto status of NEPA as a monopoly and the dominant utility in the power industry. With power remaining a national problem, at the turn of the millennium, the new administration that was ushered in with the current democratic dispensation recast attention on finding lasting solution. And thus, the EPSR was born in 2000. Comprehensive restructuring was central to the new policy, namely the National Electric Power Policy, which was promulgated in 2000. The major changes were essentially two levels, institutional and operational. At the institutional level, changes were to be made to the policy framework, regulation and operations, with clear separation and delineation of responsibilities between the Ministry, the Regulatory Commission and the operators. At the operational level, NEPA was to be vertically and horizontally unbundled into sectors and successor companies, respectively, to create plurality of operators in generation distribution as a way of encouraging and engendering competition and choice. It is important to constantly bear in mind that the central element of reform are competition and choice. To expand further, understanding how we got into the rot and how the electricity market can work seamlessly, it is important and instructive for us to know this if we're going to exit the rot. and how they can be remedied if the sector is to be restored is absolutely important. All the sector challenges, inadequate gas supply, transmission and distribution infrastructure deficit, non-cost reflected tariffs, poor revenue collection, legendary system losses, are all consequences and not causes of government and market failures, using the economic terminologies. Reform was about creating a market where competition is feasible and instituting effective regulation where competition is not feasible because of the monopolistic characteristics of distribution and transmission. From this premise, it stands to reason that the invisible hand of the market cannot be left to chance, especially when you're coming from the sort of base we were starting from. I must commend the efforts of the current administration. The minister has my admiration and sympathy. Those of us gathered here had the simpler task of designing and implementing reform. He, on the other hand, has the unenviable task of debugging some of the problems that we put in place and fixing real issues and challenges post-privatization that have significant monetary implications, with hordes of private investors clamoring for the preservation of their money and breathing down his neck. And I admire him greatly because he's approached this with gusto and aplomb, and his spirit is quite indefatigable, and we have to commend that. So what do we do, Patrick? Okay, so let me just quickly run through. I'll sit a few more minutes just to run through the rest of that's the first section, that's the background and the reason, the rationale for the reform. And the second part essentially talks about the reform implementation, achievements and challenges. In terms of milestone achievements, now let me turn my attention basically to this. While one may be a bit sympathetic to the view that there is no justifiable basis for talking about achievements in the power sector when supply remains erratic and inadequate, and the financial status of the industry remains powerless. The truth remains that there are significant achievements. Phase one, which I'll call the pre-enactment period, saw the promulgation of the policy between 2000 and 2005, all the reform activities, rolling of NEPA, the legal regulatory framework, trade arrangements, all those things were laid and put in place. The first attempt to get the law passed after a lot of work was truncated, unfortunately, in 2003 with the expiration of the session of the National Assembly. I choose the word expiration of expiring because they've been breathing out live, so to speak. Phase two, the enactment, which was which heralded a lot of excitement. So the law eventually passed in 2005. The Regulatory Commission was established in 2006. The NEPA sister companies were incorporated in 2006, and were proprietized with financial and operational autonomies granted to them in 2009. Tariff regulation, MIG implementation, market rules, grid code were all instituted and implementation commenced in 2009. Then the phase three is the actual transaction and post-transaction issues. We sold. We've created a market, albeit not working the way we expect, and promulgation of the latest one of customer eligibility. And you must admit, ladies and gentlemen, this is actually a long list of achievements. Some noteworthy and not so noteworthy. We can discuss that in detail later. There's a long section about the reform implementation, which I'll just skip this. I'll give the paper to Patrick, and I'm sure you'll find it on the website, or whoever wants to get a copy of it can either see me afterwards or talk to Patrick. Oh, before I leave that, there's one area in particular that I think is very important with respect to implementation of the reform. I'll just read one paragraph from this. And of course, there were too many players and too many issues to worry about. And the government considered it imperative to bring all the various bodies who were sometimes arguing amongst themselves into the fold. And And we all know as well that the centrality of energy in economic development, albeit subsumed and endogenous to technology. The fact that the electricity value chain straddles a number of industries meant sectors like oil and gas, power, manufacturing, and so on and so forth had to have representation under the aegis of NCP, National Council for Privatization. And there was a committee set up, EPIC, which was chaired, the committee of NCP, which was chaired by the minister, and BP was the secretariat. EPIC was effectively the clearinghouse for deliberations and recommendations on matters pertaining to policy, strategies, and technical issues. That was where the arguments, that was where all the issues were thrashed before they were presented to government for adoption and ultimately for implementation. And also I'd like to mention the support that came from the donor agencies, the multilateral agencies like the World Bank. Of course, sometimes with all this party, you need to get people to come together. So there was a need for a neutral party, and that's how the World Bank was very generous in supporting the whole program with stakeholders, foreign leaders, sectoral leaders from which we used to meet on a quarterly basis, the ministry, BP, then there was NOIDAC and other stakeholders. Okay. My thoughts and reflections, I'm sure you'd like to hear that. Or should I go and sit down now? Okay, so let me just, what do you want to do? Okay, let me just clear up this one more time, promise. It's I did tell you that I will fail, and it's all for a good cause. Finally, section 3 of my presentation, reflections and thoughts. While building additional generation, transmission and distribution infrastructure, as outlined in the PSRP plan being implemented by the current administration, while that is important to supply electricity to almost 200 million Nigerians in the medium to long term, emphasis, this is my view, emphasis needs to be placed on short-term improvements and reinforcing the structural changes that reform ushered in to promote efficiency, competition, choice, and sector viability, which will ultimately lead to better service delivery. And I've sort of put this together on the 3 headings: improving operations, policy, and also completing the reform, advancing the reform. And why I did that, because sometimes you need to sort of hook these things onto the necks of various institutions. So when you talk about improving operations, you can push that to the regulator, the policy formulators, and also advancing the reform, BP, who's entitled by law to midwife the reform. And some of the bullet points that I put together here under improving operations, we need to look at reducing, or the sector should look at reducing technical and non-technical losses, and as a matter of national and firm priority respectively. We'll talk about that in detail during the course of the conversation. There's too much emphasis on tariff increases, if you ask me. I think the focus needs to shift to cost reduction. Why? Allowing prices to rise uncontrolled has dire consequences for the economy and the macroeconomy of the country. Cost components should be revisited. And I was one of the people that, one of the slaves or whatever that worked on NYT or my days in BP, so I understand that model very well. And also need to focus on enhancing energy accountability and trade arrangements need to be emphasized. Commercial viability risks are not being adequately assessed and mitigated. On the policy side, there's urgent interventions required to address currency mismatch in debt finance and gas sales as we have today. That's what's causing the pricing, plan for price increase. Improving access to electricity must be addressed, as approximately 50%, that's about 100 million people, are yet to be connected to some power source. We're starting to see developments of, in this area, this standalone system that's being pushed right now. I can go on and on. We also need to be mindful when we push electricity because to areas which are not viable. Do we have the demand sufficient to justify various claims that we make, 100,000 megawatts and so on. Yes. Okay, in conclusion, Patrick, I think this is actually move away from Patrick, so you can leave me alone. In conclusion, it is important to know that while structural reform is absolutely necessary to improve power supply, it is, however, it does not meet the sufficiency condition. The essence of reform must be re-enthroned. The body of empirical evidence out there suggests that sufficiency condition is met and power supply improvement will happen sustainably when regulation is clear and effective, when operation is efficient, when losses are brought within reasonable thresholds, when electricity pricing is underpinned by cost minimization, and not revenue maximization, when risks are identified and mitigation strategies are appropriate, when system expansion is planned and coordinated across the whole value chain, when economic activity or economics becomes the focal point of operations of the sector. Nations that experience similar to what Nigeria is currently experiencing in terms of satisfactory power supply addressed some of the challenges I've mentioned by internalizing and dealing with the challenges directly. Nigeria can be one of those nations. We're taking too long, but we can be one of those nations. And on this note, ladies and gentlemen, I just state that I am, and remain optimistic on this power sector. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I'm sure we'll have opportunities to get into more detailed discussions around those. Permit me to move very quickly to invite Professor Vat Nagi to present his own opening remarks.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first let me applaud the initiative of Nextier to call us together, the good and the bad. And I really mean it. And so all the good things they did, we decided to amplify and make work. All the things that were not working, maybe not from just an immediate past administration, but maybe from sequences of administrations, we tried to address. And because of that, I am not going to go over what my brother, Honorable Minister, Dr. Lanre Babalola, discussed about the formation of EPSRA, that is the Electric Power Sector Reform Act. I will not talk about the sequence of events that led to the establishment of NERC, but I will talk about what happened in 2000, between 2007 and 2009 with regard to NERC, because the regulator, for whatever reason, good or bad, got sacked. And it became an impediment to the entire power sector, beyond what people inside the government can appreciate. Because without a functioning regulator, and a functioning regulator is not really just that you have people in the regulatory commission. It's that you actually have those people who went through Senate approval, and they're sitting as a commission. And interestingly, and we only learned from experience by trying to get things passed from the commission, that that's not a commission. So one of the first things that we had to do when I came on board was to see what we can do to bring back a functioning commission. I didn't come as a minister, I came as a special advisor to Mr. President and also chairman of Presidential Task Force. I would say also that the formation of the Presidential Task Force, the Presidential Action Committee on Power, really put impetus and force to accomplishment of a lot of things that got done. Basically, we took the act, which to me was like at 5,000 feet, and we wanted to bring the act to practical implementable level. That's what the power sector reform roadmap was about. So we set up the task, the government set up the task force as an implementation of what will come from the Presidential Action Committee on Power. And for all of us to appreciate what really the Presidential Action Committee on Power was like, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we would have that meeting. And that meeting would involve all the key stakeholders in the government. The president, the vice president, all the key ministers would be present. And decisions will be taken about whatever may be an impediment, and we in the task force, we take those decisions and go to implement. The task force had units, transmission, distribution, the regulatory, because even the setting up of the regulatory commission came from the work of that particular unit, and so on. And then we had a monitoring and evaluation team. And we put together a fantastic group of people from across the world who came together to work on the Nigerian power sector. And many of them are here. I want to use this opportunity to thank you, because I have not had opportunity to have many of you together like this. So thank you very much, because yes, how much is it worth? I think the government would be monetizing it for all of us. But I want to say in that regard that we were quite lucky when I became minister to attach the Presidential Task Force to the ministry as a think tank and implementation engine that will advise the actual ministry on what to do. Some of the key leaders are also here, and I believe that really was quite effective, but we had to seek permission of the president to do that. The privatization was an outcome we initiated during our own time, the privatization program. And I recall that some international organizations came to say to me, you shouldn't really privatize all the GENCOs and DISCOs together at the same time. But when the former president set up a presidential advisory council, I was a member and chairman of the Power Committee of it. I learned a lot about the dynamics of the country. And that if we privatized just a few, there will be rebellion in the country. That's something those people didn't know about. And so it was sort of a risk on our part, but something that we felt was the best way to move forward. So we put forward all the assets. And people said to me, how do you expect that Yola Disco will be bought? It is the worst performing disco in the country, because the managing director of Yola Disco will come every month, cap in hand, to ask for money to pay salaries. And so, but I said, no, we're going to put every disco on the market, and we did. Surprisingly, all of them got bids. And that is that was a very remarkable achievement. Just that all of the discos and gencos got bidded for. But we had something very cardinal that all of us should remember, that actually comes to play today. We said that we must have every single bidder have two capacities: financial capability and technical capability. You don't have it, you don't get the asset. The bids were submitted when I was still there, but I would say that when the evaluation came, I had left office. I think it is for us to judge whether the people who took control of the assets have these two qualities. I am confident that if they did, we wouldn't have all the problems which we are talking about today. Because the distribution companies, the real driver for privatizing a distribution company was for the distribution company to become credit-worthy, so that it can get into bilateral trade, buy power from the GENCO. But the GENCO has to be able to deal with, to be sure that they will be able to get their money. That's the real, that was the issue. And it requires a lot of investment, which means they're not borrowing money and being over-leveraged. So, we know what the situation is now. Let me move quickly to saying that the power reform roadmap, I think most people understand that it was quite internationally heralded, as well thought out, as a good plan for Nigeria. And I believe that if we followed the roadmap, and of course any plan will have to be tweaked along the way, that if we followed it strictly, that we would arrive at the promised land, which is reliable electricity for the country. There are some areas that I believe that we need to be focusing on as a country. This issue of creditworthiness of discos need to be addressed. And I believe that the agreement they signed with governments need to be enforced, but government needs to play its own part by addressing the issue of cost-reflective tariff. The cost-reflective tariff, even if you look at just what's happened in the last year and a half, we're in the power sector, so we know that just the currency issue alone, the FX issue, without adjustment to the currency, then whomever is collecting this is at a losing end. And so there must be a mechanism to adjust for such. Not to talk of inflation, just very straightforward things. Also, I would say consistency in the policy. Consistent policy, respect of agreements. Let's not veer back and forth. These are some of the issues. Now, if you ask me, have we achieved something? I would say yes. We've achieved a lot. Even if power hasn't grown as fast as we are thinking, as we should want, there are a lot of people who are knowledgeable in power, in addition to those who were in PHCM. There are many experts now. So there's the ability of people to want to have capacity to invest in power in various areas or be advisors. So we have all them. We'll be able to transition from government control to private sector control for the GENCOs and DISCOs. And that is a major achievement, regardless of whether they are performing the way they're supposed to. And by the way, to perform well, maybe this is going to come during questions. I would say that there must be investment, new investment. New investors need to come in, particularly in the DISCOs. They need to come in. So, I thank you very much for the opportunity to make these opening remarks about this. I think that during question and answer, we may be able to do more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Knight. And again, moving very quickly, I'd like to invite Professor Chinedu to make his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would first like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Nextier for convening this very important dialogue. It's just that I noticed that 10 minutes at next year can be approximated to the formula 30 over 3. 30 over n, where n is the your number, serial number. If it is your serial number is 1, is 30 over 1, that is 30. Your serial number is 2, is 30 over 2, that is 15. And I hope mine will be between 1 and 10. Between 2 and 3, rather. It's so great to see my brothers, the generals who have been in the sector and who have done very well. Wonderful also to see our partners, national, international, various organizations that lent us a lot of support as we try to work in a very difficult terrain. I had the rare privilege of working as Minister of Power between February 2013 and May 2015. At the time of my appointment, the power sector in Nigeria had passed through a lot of crises. My immediate predecessor, who had a passion and worked so very hard, apparently left office, and quite a while there was no substantive minister of power. By that time, the sector had a vertically integrated power market. It was in transition from government ownership and management of electricity asset to that is privately driven, following the Extra Act, Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005. Then it was also dominated by uncompetitive tariffs. One of the things I dwelt on when I came was looking at the tariffs and then asking the question, whether all the necessary components were integrated into finding a model for a sustainable or cost-reflective tariff. Unfortunately, we didn't have one. Then the power sector was operating in an unsustainable manner for continual investment by government. Government could no longer continue to spend all that money. That was because of inefficiency in market operations, high collection in some areas, but very poorly managed market situation and heavily subsidized by the government, and then porous regulation. These were some of the issues and challenges, and others included the fact that the sector was at what could be called a pregnant mother, waiting to give birth to a brand new baby, and that was the transition from public sector dominated, owned and run to a private sector driven power sector. Our task and mandate at that time was to responsibly see through the process of privatization that had already begun and had reached an advanced stage when my brother, Professor Najib, was minister. It had really advanced substantially. And in addition to that, to grow the availability of power, the availability of supply, reliability of electricity in the country, to try to meet the demands, ever increasing demands of our people. And we were faced with several decisions and actions to mitigate and resolve some of these challenges and issues that dominated the sector. Some of them seemed intractable, and this included to ensure effective and efficient monitoring and evaluation of the power sector value chain, as well as enhance and strengthen capacity of the grid to accommodate the increased capacity and improve operational standards and quality. These things are by no means easy. Some of these issues and challenges that we faced included managing the market viably. That was quite a challenge, and it influenced our decision for the partial term transition electricity market declaration in a partial format, and then of course tariff modifications depending on what was happening in the market. Then of course the government, thinking that privatization would have been concluded in 2012, did not provide a kobo for Gencos or Discos in 2013 for the budget. So there was no money set aside for any of them. We handed over in November, which means that for 11 months, these Gencos and Discos were operating without any money from the federal government. So low budgetary allocation, as I said earlier, was very difficult and put us in a very tight corner. Reduced funding for the Ministry of Power, of course, and then zero recurring funding for TCN in 2013, and some money was set aside in the budget for capital expenditure, but much of it not released. Managing the successful monitoring and evaluation of the privatization process was one of our challenges. Financing for driving and implementing renewable energy projects, this was something, a task we gave to ourselves. And then of course, labor issues. Many of us will remember how labor almost made it impossible for my predecessor to continue the good work he was doing. When I came on board, the same thing continued. We happened to, by the grace of God, manage the situation, as our people would say in Igbo adage, trying to manage carrying on your back someone whose waist is broken. That was the situation we found ourselves. Then there was the issue of operational inefficiency that we had to deal with, and then of course the major issue of vandalism not only of the gas pipeline delivery system, but also of the transmission assets, including transformers, substations, wires, etc. These were challenges. Some of the things we could say, in all modesty, that we were able to do, I wouldn't know whether to call them achievements or whatever, are as follows. Handing over the generation and distribution assets to the private sector owners, which we effectively completed by November 2013. Implementation of Operation Light Up Rural Nigeria, because I was of the firm view and opinion that we can really supply the rural communities with renewable energy without using our grids. We demonstrated this by taking some communities not very far flung from Abuja, but to show that it could be done. Durumi, Shape and Buaru, which was commissioned by President Jonathan on the 13th of January 2014, and they celebrated 1 year of uninterrupted power supply on the 13th of January 2015. These are some of the achievements: establishment of NEMSA, rehabilitation of NBET, completion of some of the NDPHC programs, NIPP projects, and then gas price increase, which was seen as a very serious problem at that time. We increased that with the help of the Petroleum Ministry and NEC, of course. Then the provision of 213 billion Naira CBN intervention funds, the passage of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Plan by government, issuance of soda to Manitoba Hydro, etc. These were some of the things we accomplished. And then following, I would say lessons learned. Privatization, no matter how poorly it's being run now, is actually the best thing for Nigeria. Unfortunately, some of those that acquire the assets have no business being the ones that got the assets. But here we are. We have to make the best use. Then we also had problems and learned that special interests are so powerful in Nigeria. And God help you if you're a minister, because you will have to deal with so many of them. Then we had to develop very powerful tools. And then finally, I will talk about the way for which and support the deployment of renewable energy. Solar is number one. If you added all the capacities or potentials of all the fossil fuels, whether it is diesel, gas, petrol, kerosene, or whatever, you added it to all the coal capacity in Africa, you added that to all the hydropower capacity in Africa, you added that all summation to the hydrothermal capacity in Africa. Solar will give Africa 3 times all of this in power supply. We need to look at that very seriously. Next is to encourage embedded generation and distributed power. There's no government in Nigeria that can handle taking transmission infrastructure to every nook and cranny of Nigeria. It will cost trillions of naira to do that. No government can do that. But with embedded generation, captive power, distributed power, we can save the government all of that and allow the private sector to go on that track. And then, of course, I'm suggesting and hoping that there will be some modifications of the regulation so that NEC will kindly consider raising the threshold for licensing from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts, so that private companies, communities, energy centers like clusters of industries, manufacturing clusters, agricultural clusters, business clusters, and so on, can come together and have power plants without any encumbrances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nebo. And he was very right in the formula he set out at the beginning of his speech. So I was supposed to spend the next 30 minutes in a moderated discussion, but being that I'm number 4, if you work that equation out, that means I've got about 7.5 minutes. Because I think it's important to open it up to the audience, to have a chance to talk about some of these key issues. But permit me to ask maybe 1 or 2 questions before we open it up to the audience. I want to say that the market has failed. Because a market that is not able to collect, not able to meet its obligations, where it is clear to anyone who cares to investigate that the people who bought these companies have neither the technical nor the financial capabilities to run the companies they bought, essentially the market has failed. And it appears that we are now hostage to these people. Would that be a fair statement to make, Professor Naji?
Why be bad?
Why not?
Anyway, I would wonder whether you can just clearly say that the market has failed. I would say that there are failures for obvious reasons. Some of the things that we've talked about here, there are structures in place, and that if the structures are empowered, that we would not have the situation we have now. I mean, certainly, you have the institutions. One of the key critical things of the reform, which is what this thing is about, is setting up of institutions. The institutions like the bulk trader as a handholder for power purchase and vesting. It's there, but it needs to have the backup that ensures the guarantees. So if you wipe out the funds in it, then there will be failure. So that is one. The tariff that I talk about, when we came, tariff, we're forgetting, was 6 naira per kilowatt hour. We raised it in one go to 22 naira levelized tariff. And it took a lot of courage to actually do that. It's a very difficult thing to do because just in January of that year that we put that tariff in place, there was a protest because of fuel subsidy removal. But it's there. Now, the courage now to get the tariff to where it is supposed to be is very important. The government needs to do that. So there are a number of things I could talk about here, which if we do, then the liquidity issue that we have now will go away. So there's a part that the government needs to play, there's a part that the people who operate the industry will need to play. If they play these roles and people have courage to say, we want power in Nigeria, and you still have to pay for power that you have. It doesn't make sense that a person who is doing self-generation will be paying 80 naira or 100 naira per kilowatt hour, but cannot be told that it should pay for power if it is 40 or 50 naira. I know it's not a good discussion out there, but it is the reality. It's the actual reality. So there are just some things that we as a country, what the government needs to do, courage needs to be in place. That's
sure.
Mine.
So, Larry, it appears to me that there's still a lot of pain that we need to go through to get to an efficient market. The people need to go through the pain of paying a bit more tariff. The government needs to go through the pain of doing everything it's set itself out to do. How do we communicate this to all parties concerned to understand that all of these things need to happen for the market to actually evolve into an efficient market?
Well, I think first of all, we need to be very careful when we say the market has failed. California experienced a collapse in the 90s. It is considered a failure. And the issue was whether the market really failed or reform went too far. The fact that you're not collecting enough money in Nigeria doesn't necessarily mean that the market has failed. You need to define it properly. It's failing to meet revenue expectations, or it's failing because the market design is faulty. They're two different things entirely. So we need to be very clear in our minds when we say failure. The fact that we're not getting enough power doesn't mean that we can just cast this blanket allegation, accusation, whatever you want to call it. Now the issue truly at the end of the day is that so it comes back to what government is doing. Now I've heard a number of times this evening saying that a lot of people in the power sector have no business in the power sector. Hang on a second. They didn't walk into the power sector, they were assessed, they were evaluated, and they were determined to be competent. So
Were they?
There was a process. There was a process. There was a process. If you question the integrity of the process, that's something else entirely. And as Prof said, in terms of financial competence, technical competence, they come with all those things. So what accounts for the fact that they failed so spectacularly? The truth of the matter is that we were focusing on the wrong things. We knew from the audio that investment was a problem. There was not enough investment in the sector. There was a presentation which was made famous by Engineer Makoju of period of throughout the 90s, very little investment into the sector. So we knew that. You sold the sector, the money did not trickle back into the sector. Basically, it took every single penny this guys had on the Genco side and Disco side to basically raise money for government, and you spent it. It didn't go back to the sector.
But when they're supposed to bring additional monies after they bought the company, to invest in the company.
The issue at the end of the day is that you have to be very realistic with yourself. There's a problem today in the sector. We all know that most of the people that bought into the power sector borrowed money from local banks to buy into the sector. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Now, what has happened is that the debt finance is not recognized in tariff consideration. So how they're going to make their money back is not clear to them. So they are at the point now they're now saying that why should I bring in additional capital when the first one that we brought in to acquire this asset is not doing well? So I think there were a number of issues on our part, generally in the handling of the transaction, that we were overly optimistic about, thinking that these guys had endless pockets and they could just keep bringing money out to solve the problem. And we found out today that's not the case.
Professor Nebo, I hate to put you on the spot, but the sales happened under your watch. And many observers would say that the folks who bought the companies have not invested the type of money that one would expect they should invest when they buy these assets. Anyway, we beat around the bush, we're still going to come back to some of those factors, and we know that government hasn't met its own end of the bargain. At what point do we say that this thing is not working, that maybe we need to revisit the arrangement in some way, shape or form? Because right now the fact is that we're stuck in a situation where it's not working.
Well, I would say that revisiting the entire process is not warranted. Like Dr. Babalola said, not having enough liquidity system does not mean that it has failed. However, when it comes to the issue of are these people competent enough, I think something went wrong. And the emphasis might have been on paperwork that had to do with a lot of financials. Some of them, you know how good our people are and how adept they are at coming up with all kinds of documentations that appear to be correct, whereas the law of taking over the system. But again, it appears that the technical issue was not very much looked into. You can throw all the money you want into a system and it will never work. Because when you get people who are incompetent, who don't have the clouds, who don't have the technical know-how to run this system, and because they are favored people, you now give it to them to run, you're going to run into problems. And that's basically what we have now. So another thing too is the issue of our consumers. Many people not only enjoy, but brag about the fact that they consume electricity free of charge. May have told us, sold white elephant capacities to us, and then remember that government still owns 40% of the discos, and 10-20% of the gencos. So government cannot completely wash its hands off. That is part of the reason that we have to make arrangements to infuse liquidity using central bank, as an organ to ensure that the system doesn't collapse completely.
Excellent. We'll open it up for questions in 2 seconds. But I wonder if Prof. Naji can share a bit on your reflections, and you shared some of it with how the Presidential Action Committee was set up, the Presidential Task Force, and the coordination that happened from the presidency to across the sector, which led to some of the successes of that era. As you look at the sector today, and this is not a question to be critical, is to look at lessons that the current administration could learn from your experience. Are there things you see that this current administration could be doing to ensure better coordination, especially as we await some progress on the PSRP?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. Actually, if we start from the point of view that the ministries are not set up to do some of what we need to do in the power sector, we would begin to understand. And so you go to a typical ministry, people, civil servants, they want to do, well, if you didn't have PHCN, we wouldn't get much done. But even at that, when you want to really move into a commercial space where you are trying to get investors to come into the country to invest, you really need to get people who understand how to do power business, the business itself. The people in PHCN were fantastic engineers, first class, really. But they had never really done power business. They were not there. So you need people who understand the whole chain of the business, the value chain, from the fueling all the way to the trade, the power, the collections. Because if you really look at it, it is fair enough for a distribution company run at that time to just declare what they have collected, and that will be just fine. So the setting up of the Power Action Committee was about ensuring that all these problems get solved so that investors see that the government is able to deal with the commercial issues of the power business. So the Presidential Action Committee on Power, I've described how it was set up, but it was set up so that any problem in the sector will be immediately addressed. For example, that when we came, we found out that we had transformers
switch gears, all kinds of equipment belonging to NEPA, to PACN, are the wharf. For years, some of them 5 years, some 7 years, never cleared. Who is responsible? And actually, some people just make deals, carry these things and sell. So we had to now get the controller of customs to work with us to address this issue. And so the president simply, at that meeting, we said the controller of customs should do this. The task force will go and ensure that it gets done, because it has its own committee that includes such people from the customs, from Accountant General of the Federation, from virtually all the key institutions that should solve problems. And they would meet, because the task force was a day-to-day organization. The meeting, we have meeting every week, where all these people must report. If you don't report, we report you to the president that you're not coming to meeting. And we're not playing around. Because it may be that that particular day, we needed you to go to do something. So everybody was responsible. Even this fuel that Prof talked about. The fuel, we had to get the Ministry of Petroleum to work with the Ministry of Power. Committee set up. We would bring all the IOCs, the leaders of IOCs to the meeting. You just come and sit. Tell us how much gas you can give us. You have domestic gas obligation. And you need to give us that domestic gas obligation. So let's see why you can't give it to us. So they used to talk about it as Minister's gas, Minister of Power's gas. You have to give it to us. So we set a timeline to cure your problem while you're not providing that gas. That's why we were able to begin to improve the power that time. So if we don't have focus, very strong focus, in being able to address all the things that prevent us from solving this problem, we are not going to achieve this. That's basically mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll open it up for questions. We'll take
this forum should really be with the Ministry of Power, where ex-ministers sit down with the current minister and let that be institutional knowledge. Like you said, government is a continuum. But let me disagree with our minister's one. We have not failed yet, but we are failing. Are we going to wait until we fail? No. Way forward, from a finance point of view, I came from investment banking into TCN. By way of introduction, my name is Sonny Roche, ex-student of TCN. It was a school. Professor Nebo mentioned that one of the achievements was Manitoba. Manitoba is one of the worst things that ever happened to the history of power sector in this country. They lacked competence, they lacked character, they lacked courage. Students of history and power know that there are 3 C's. C's in leadership: character, courage, and competence. And leaders of the power sector as a group have shown total lack of those 3 C's. You did well in your time. Government is magic. Fela calls it government magic. They turn electric to candle. Because I'm coming. As a way forward, I would propose a power sector anchor. Just like the central bank intervened with the bank before they failed to get them recapitalized. Government has no business owning 40% in the power sector. Bring it down to 10%, let the 10% be golden shares, where you can have some kind of say. Let the 30 go. Recapitalize these companies, and the people who were favored by wrong government will not be favored by this government. Money is the key thing. And in business, as a banker, when you give out loan, the first question we are asked in investment banking, where is the source of repayment? Source of repayment is from cash flow generated from the business. And these people that bought this asset thought they were buying GSM. It's not the same thing. And finally, international community, people who have experienced this before. I always say there's no Nigerian way of flying the Boeing 747. There's a proper way. You start from the commercial end. The company that will bring in the money are the discos. You start and make sure that their networks and their substations, their transformers are up to 100% peak. Fantastic. No emotions, no sentiments. A power committee has a retired generals where you have people. It's about money, investment banking, and cash flow. It's about cash flow. Sorry, let me just stop, please. It's a very serious matter. When you borrow 70% debt as against 10% equity to invest in serious business, you have failed. What stops me and my brother doing that are poor men like us going to borrow 100% to buy an asset? It will not work. There is no Nigerian way of flying the Boeing 747. There is only the proper way to run the power sector.
Thank you for all of the former ministers for a very interesting presentation. My question is about the tariff, which obviously is not the only issue in the sector, but it's a very important issue, and there's been a number of mentions of a cost-reflective tariff. But one issue is not whether the tariff is at the right level, but why costs are so high, so that the cost-reflective tariff is so high, and that presents a very big political and practical challenge. I wonder what each of the ministers think are the best one or two areas to look at to bring down the cost-reflective tariff to make the political problem a little more tractable.
Thank you.
Democracy Provision from the Nigerian Gas Association. Thanks for the presentation. Just a few points. Do we think, looking back, do we think we could have phased the implementation of the reform? Like the honorable ministers have alluded to, power sector is very complex, issues around it. But that's looking back, we're here to look forward. And two, I think from the gas end of the value chain, I mean, our honorable minister, Professor Nebu has said renewable, we should look at it. But for now, and in foreseeable future, I think gas to power generation still will account for about 70–80%. So on the gas end, there are a number of issues. But what we see is that there doesn't seem to be a synergy across the value chain. If you look right here, probably this is probably the first time NGA is coming, or a few times. We just finished a sector, an event yesterday in Lagos. The power people were not there. So there are silos all over the place. These silos need to be closed. And then we should have the synergy across. And so that's the point I think we need to.
Thank you very much.
So I think I have something to say, particularly after, when one leaves NEC, you must stay silent for 2 years, and that gives you time to reflect on what could have been or what didn't happen and things that happened. So I won't ask a question. I'll actually make 2 comments. The first one from my experience, and I've made some notes here which I'd like to just refer to. The first one is that reform and privatization is 99% politics and 1% economics.
Basic.
Right? There is no way you can take a decision in a sector as important as any infrastructure sector, power being one of them, perhaps even the most important, without actually taking a decision that affect all sorts of things, livelihoods, economies, and all that. So I'll give 2 examples of how this can play out, and I hope that our 2 committee chairmen will bear this in mind, because they actually have a key role to play in this, and I hope that role will be played. The first one was on 14th of May 2003. Larry referred to it. Most of us here don't realize that the Power Sector Reform Act was actually passed in 2003. And when it was passed, after huge effort by us in BP, we actually killed ourselves to get the National Assembly to pass that bill. We took it to the president, and we all know who that president was at that time. And the guy who sent us to go and have this bill passed. When I joined BP, I had only 2 mandates. One from Nextier was get this act passed. The second one was break up NEPA. All right? They are both political, obviously. So we took this thing to OBJ, put it on his table for assent. He came out and said, I will not sign. The work of 2 years went down the drain with one sentence. I will not sign. And we asked him why. He came up with all sorts of reasons. Are we applying Chatham House rules here?
Yes.
It doesn't matter, even if we're not. He said I will not sign. No, I don't have any. Not anymore. And later on, it turned out, why didn't you sign? Because I will be empowering my vice president. Under the Act, the vice president is the chairman of the NCP, and it's the NCP's responsibility to enforce and to implement the various reform measures in the Act. We all know now, with the benefit of hindsight, what was going on then. At that time. We didn't know at the time, but we now know what it was. So for a purely political reason, this country was held back for 2 years from carrying out reform measures that were ready to be implemented. I don't think we can ever really understand what could have been. We know what we had done with PHCN or NEPA as then was ready to be unbundled at that time. We know what we had done going out to get core investors, real investors this time, not the type that the neighbor was talking about. We went to RWE, Scottish Power, Aeon, all sorts, signed MOUs with them. All they wanted was one thing: pass your act, and we'll come. The signed paper saying that. As it was, we didn't take that decision. Now, let's think about what happens then when you don't carry out the political moves that you say you want to make around reform. What does the message send? And that really is why when we finally got around to doing privatization, the only people who were interested in coming to Nigeria were who? These people that the people was talking about. We couldn't get better than that, not because we didn't try. They just simply did not want to be disappointed a third time, because it happened in 2003, 2005, 2006, when the second set of privatizations were truncated again by the Arab administration, and then again, who would come a third time? Very few. So that's one. The second one, which I want to point out, is that if you just indulge me, happened on the 24th of March 2015. Now, you have a NERC that had been in place from 2010, or 2011, 2010 actually, December, my colleagues. And we had spent 4 years persuading Nigeria as to why it makes sense to move towards a cost-reflective tariff, and actually taking those decisions. And then 4 days before election, after we had put in place the 213 billion transaction that the neighbor was talking about, let's not forget, one of the big problems that we had was that the power sector was belabored by a huge burden. That debt, it was then about 190 to 200 billion. Today I hear it's close to $1 trillion. And we got the CBN to agree to pay it off via a loan without any security whatsoever from the power sector companies, except a charge of 3 naira per kilowatt hour on top of the tariff to pay the CBN. CBN put that money out. And then what did we do? We reduced the tariff. 4 days before election. Why? Maybe it's politics, maybe it's economics. We all think, I'm sure we all know. So, let me just finish. I think I'll do the same thing that we'll stay here. I'm sure we'll all be happy to stay until 10 o'clock. So, that's one. Privatization is 99% politics, 1% economics. The second one now about the sector.
The third one.
No, the second one. So my second point. My first point was about the politics. The second point I want to talk about this is, how do we go forward then? We've talked about the market, whether we have one or not. I really don't think, with all due respect, that we have a market yet. What is the first objective of NERC under the Act? If we look at what the Act says, Section 32A, the very first objective of NERC is to actually set up a market. And how do you set up a market? It's not on paper. It's the institutions, the rules, the contracts, the people that actually make that market work. It's not the nice designs that we have in PowerPoints and in speeches and in research and seminar papers. When you have all these rules in place, human beings then have to go out and sign contracts and agree to be bound by those contracts. That was what we spent 4 years trying to do between 2010 and 2014, and then we truncated it with one decision. So I believe that if we're going to have a proper market, we have to do 2 things. First of all, go back to those rules. Go back to those contracts. None of them are enforced. We're not looking at any of them. Discos are doing as they want. Gas suppliers are doing what they have to do. Gencos are doing what they have to do. TCN is doing what it pleases, allocating power where it wants to allocate power, how it wants to allocate power. When we have a Greek code, when we have a military code, people are doing what it is. So let's go back to that. Let's go back and do the right things and begin to build up those rules again, up to a point where we then do the second thing, which is what the neighbor alluded to. We tend to forget that the federal government of Nigeria owns 40% in the fiscals. Free carry. Who runs a business carrying 40% for free and still wants to succeed? Nobody, not even if the 40% shareholder is the government. So what is the implication of the government holding 40%? Until the government can sit down with its 60% shareholders and work out a way for all of them to go out again and come in with new shareholders who have two things, equity and management, I don't think that we're going to have a situation where we will have new capital coming into this industry. If we don't deal with that, then of course we'll come to the where it's at.
Professor Nnaji started by saying they wanted to take particular steps. The international partners had suggested breaking up the market slowly, incrementally, and they were told that there would be a riot. Was it a riot or a rebellion? The political problem, and that's what AO has mentioned here. And I'm asking myself, how do we find our way around this? Because it's not the economics, it's not even the technical side, because there's no Nigerian way to fly a 747, thank God. It is about the politics, and it's about how you sell it and how you get it going. So my question, I guess, is where can we start? Where can we at least prove the model? Is it Lagos? Maybe Lagos is too big. Maybe it's Aba, since geometric is already there, and there's already a small industrial hub there. Where can we prove the model and just show everybody that this in fact works? We're not, you know, we've privatized, we've signed deals and all that kind. Nobody has gone to swear in Okija Shrine. We can renegotiate. This is not Brexit. It's up to us. If the thing is not working, we're allowed to change our minds. But my question is, where's the starting point? You can't do it nationally. Nigeria is too big, too unwieldy, too many special interests. So where do we start? We just need to pick one point in the ground and stick the flag in and say, this is where we're going to start. And I just wonder if anybody has the so-called courage to decide where to put that bloody flag. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
President of Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria.
25 seconds.
Thanks, President Nebo. It's clear the way to go is distributed and renewables. We have a question. Is there a way, or is there a forum, or a way where, you know, the past ministers and probably the current ministers, because I believe the honorable ex-ministers will be seeing the sector in a different perspective, being outside them. Is there a way we interact with the current man there to share ideas, share these views, let them see the challenges and the opportunities, and probably have a way of having, you know, yes. Like
Thank you.
And it's very simple. The reforms as you envisaged them in PPE originally, is it the reality that you see that has been implemented today?
My first question goes to financing. Now, we've heard the narrative of, you know, there's no liquidity in the sector. But I have a question. What was the challenge when you guys were in charge in terms of raising the money? Because if you look at a utility, you know, it's an asset that pays for itself. You know, yes, it might not come immediately, but with time. And I remember being at an investment forum organized by BPE in 2001 in New York, at Citibank. And the VP at the time basically said, come and invest to the audience, and you'll get your money out. And he made it out that there was no problems. You won't have any exit challenges, just bring your money in, and we'll do that. So I'm curious to understand what happened. You know, why is it such a hard sell? The second question I have very quickly, Patrick, is the issue of local content. The reality is that if you look at utilities around the world, they employ a lot of people. Today, the bulk of our problems in Nigeria is because a lot of people don't have jobs. And one of the promises of the power sector that it would create a lot of employment. The question is, where are the jobs? Now, if I look at the sector, we keep on talking about the, well, I say the power side of the sector, but there's a support side of the sector. If you look at the ICT in the sector, most of it has very little or no local content. If you look at something as simple as customer support,
Sure.
no, hold on to something. The last thing, my question really on that note is, what deliberate and intentional policies or activities did you guys engage in while there, and what, to create jobs? And what would you recommend to this present government to have an intentional approach to creating jobs in the sector? Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Gabriel Iosase. I'm a legal consultant and a regulation specialist. I have a question for Dr. Lanre. We're talking about reflections. And during your time as minister, sir, a major decision was taken, which to some of us affected the reform process in a major way. It's like the midwife that was working on birthing a child was removed suddenly, and that affected the child that was born. I'm talking about the removal of commissioners that were meant to bring about the reform process. Now, have you sat back after several years and looked at that decision? If you were to take that decision, would you still do it?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Question or comments that you said the question can best to phrase this issue of cost-reflective tariff. It's something that comes up all the time, but not enough question is asked as to what actually drives the cost. We assume that the investors asking for tariff increase are actually cost efficient, and they're not. So basically what we've allowed in the model is a lot of inefficiencies. So until we actually address that, in fact I did some analysis last year or 2 years ago, and the technical and non-technical losses actually add another 47% to the tariffs. So until you address those losses, you'll be forever hearing this clamor for tariff increase. So there may be a case for tariff increase, but we need to go back to the basics. Let's understand the cost drivers, and not enough is being done. And further in addition to that, if you look at the air module itself, the principle was quite unique in the sense that it wasn't based on cost minimization. It was, at that time, we didn't have enough information to do cost, basically marginal cost pricing. So we said, okay, let's start from the point of view, at that time government was struggling to pay off the legacy liabilities and things like that. We know roughly how much they need to make everybody happy, to keep the staff happy, to keep the gas supplies happy. So if we know that and we know how much power we generate, divide those two and you have a number. That's your average price. But we all know that that's not a very smart way to arrive at prices. So that decision was taken, the second best, with the mindset that over time, when we've collected enough information to be able to interrogate the cost and be able to come to more cost-efficient pricing, cost-effective pricing. So before we actually say let's move towards cost-effective pricing, we need to understand all these issues. Now, in addition to that, and all this entirely tied together, you mentioned, Prof mentioned that most of the guys who come to the power sector, they don't understand, they have no business here anymore. And also, Mr. Neville also talked about how brilliant some of those guys are, the engineers. What we fail to understand sometimes is that there are two flows in the power sector. The energy flow, the forward flow, which is basically going from BTUs, whatever you call it, convert it and you move to kilowatt hour, and that's what people consume. But that is what NEPA was so concerned about, just power, no interest in the commercial side of things. The other one is probably the most important, which is the money flow from the distribution companies back to the supply, to the transmission company, the generation of the gas suppliers. So the old guys were more concerned about the forward flow, and the new guys just want money, so they look at the back flow without making the connection. So the truth of the matter is that in between there's somewhere, and that's the job of the Regulatory Commission, should have a proper great good things. And to say that yes, we can understand why people want to ignore the forefield, why some people would want to focus so much on the battlefield. But without the two of them working in sync, you will always have it.
Excellent. The big elephant in the room is politics. And Simon Kusa captured it well by saying, you know, where's the starting point? How do we begin to engage this big elephant? And just because he mentioned Aba, I thought maybe Professor Naji would take a shot at that.
Oh, well, yes, Aba and politics. Anyway, I have to say that, let me talk about the model, because the model was created as a way to address a whole range of problems that prevent the sector. First, you're able to remove the issue of the effect of the national grid. You have an embedded power in a ring-fenced area, not so large, because it's 9 local governments out of Abia State, 17 local governments. And the intention is to bring absolute reliable power there. But to do it, you have to do the same thing that we wanted discos to do, which is take the disco, invest in the network, invest in all the issues that should reduce the average technical, commercial, and collection losses that Larry was talking about. This is exactly what had been done. A matter of fact, if you look at the value of the asset of Aba, let's say it's 1 naira. We have invested 7 naira in Aba to improve just that distribution network. It's very expensive. Let me illustrate to put it in perspective. I have no idea how many distribution companies in this country, those who took over distribution companies, that have built one single substation of appropriate size. When we came into Aba, we found 3 dilapidated PHCN substations, 2 by 15 MVA each. We went ahead and built 4 brand new ones of the same size, and rehabilitated and refurbished the 3 existing ones. That's now 7 substations, 2 by 15 MVA each. That's a lot of investment. Then we built power lines, and anybody who has gone to Aba will see the sort of tubular poles that we use to, if you're going to the airport from here, you will see tubular poles. But if you go to Aba, there are bigger tubular poles that we've used to avoid any kind of issues going into the future. And then we built 105 kilometers of additional 33 kV line, and to ensure that to all these substations they get power reliably. So the whole intention is to address what Larry was talking about. You know, that you need to really invest. If you're coming to buy a distribution company and you don't have money to invest and you don't have technical competence, you have no business being there. Which addresses what my brother is saying. So, and it is the power plant, 188 megawatts, is embedded. It doesn't supply to the national grid except excess power. It supplies power locally. That's the intention. If we do that in different economic clusters, we would begin to see success in the power sector in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. And it's brilliant that Senator Baribe and Honorable Asuko are here because, like Simon said, you know, we're not in prison, so some of these things we're not sworn to advocate a shrine, so we can revisit some of these issues. There was a question from Adaju on how to get the former minister to speak with the incumbent. Unfortunately, the current minister could not be here for other conflicts. He has to be in Lagos today. The PAMSEC was supposed to be here. We saved his seat for him, but something else came up this evening. However, there's a plan to ensure that these conversations continue outside here. There's a question on the reform design for Dr. Balola, the way it was designed and where we are today. What have you got to say?
I think that was the question.
From Nigeria.
Yes, the simple answer to the question is the sector we have today is not what we envisaged, and so it's far from it. There was extensive discussion at that time whether again it was politics and also interest being protected.
Yeah. My reference to align Manitoba to Gideon Praise is just that for nearly a year, they didn't have the authority. But I want to fully identify with Sonny Hiroche that was the worst experience for the power sector in getting those strange bedfellows from all over the world who have no cohesiveness, no chemistry keeping them together, very low moral fiber and so on, to run at TCN. I agree with you on that.
Thank you very much. The second question was from Kim Hammond on cost-reflective tariffs. Why are they so high? What are the elements to bring it down? I wonder if Landry can
Yes, thank you very much. I think that is probably the best way to
One house, please.
I think the question, or the comments that the question, the best way to phrase this issue of cost-reflective tariff. It's something that comes up all the time, but not enough question is asked as to what actually drives the cost. We assume that the investors asking for tariff increase are actually cost efficient, and they're not. So basically what we've allowed in the model is a lot of inefficiencies. So until you actually address that, in fact I did some analysis last year or 2 years ago, and the technical and non-technical losses actually add another 47% to the tariffs. So until you address those losses, you'll be forever hearing this clamor for tariff increase. So there may be a case for tariff increase, but we need to go back to the basics. Let's understand the cost drivers, and not enough is being done. And further, in addition to that, if you look at the MYQ itself, the principle was quite unique in the sense that it wasn't based on cost minimization. It was, at that time, we didn't have enough information to do, cost, basically marginal cost pricing. So we said, okay, let's start from the point of view. At that time, government was struggling to pay off the legacy liabilities and things like that. We know roughly how much they need to make everybody happy, to keep the staff happy, to keep the gas supplies happy. So if we know that and we know how much power we generate, divide those two and you have a number. That's your average price. But we all know that that's not a very smart way to arrive at prices. So that decision was taken, a second best, with the mindset that over time we have collected enough information to be able to interrogate the cost and be able to come to more cost-efficient pricing, cost-reflective pricing. So before we actually say let's move towards cost-reflective pricing, we need to understand all these issues. Now, in addition to that, and all these things are tied together, you mentioned, Prof mentioned that most of the guys who come to the power sector, they don't understand, they have no business here and there. And also Professor Nebo also talked about how brilliant some of those guys are, the engineers. What we fail to understand sometimes is that there are two flows in the power sector. The energy flow, the forward flow, which is basically going from BTUs, whatever you want to call it, convert it and you move to kilowatt hour, and that's what people consume. But that is what NEPA was so concerned about, just power, no interest in the commercial side of things. The other one is probably the most important, which is the money flow from the distribution companies back to the supplier, to the transmission company, the generators and the gas suppliers. So the old guys were more concerned about the forward flow, and the new guys just want money, so they look at the backward flow without making the connection. So the truth of the matter is that in between there's somewhere, and that's the job of the Regulatory Commission, should have a proper grip on things, and to say that yes, you can understand why people want to ignore the forward flow, why some people would not to focus so much on the back of foot. But without the two of them working in sync, you will always have this problem.
Excellent. The big elephant in the room is politics. And Simon Gusa captured it well by saying, you know, where's the starting point? How do we begin to engage this big elephant? And just because he mentioned Aba, I thought maybe Professor Naji would take a shot at that.
Oh, well, yes. Aba and politics. Anyway, I have to say that, let me talk about the model, because the model was created as a way to address a whole range of problems that prevent the sector. First, you're able to remove the issue of the effect of the national grid. You have an embedded power in a ring-fenced area, not so large, because it's 9 local governments out of Abia State, 17 local governments. And the intention is to bring absolute reliable power there. But to do it, you have to do the same thing that we wanted discos to do, which is take the disco, invest in the network, invest in all the issues that should reduce the average technical, commercial, and collection losses that that Larry was talking about. This is exactly what had been done. A matter of fact, if you look at the value of the asset of Aba, let's say it's 1 naira. We have invested 7 naira in Aba to improve just that distribution network. It's very expensive. Let me illustrate to put it in perspective. I have no idea how many distribution companies in this country, those who took over distribution companies, that have built one single substation of appropriate size. When we came into Aba, we found 3 dilapidated PACN substations, 2 by 15 MVA each. We went ahead and built 4 brand new ones of the same size, and rehabilitated and refurbished the 3 existing ones. That's now 7 substations, 2 by 15 MVA each. That's a lot of investment. Then we built power lines, and anybody who has gone to Aba will see the sort of tubular poles that we used to, if you're going to the airport from here, you will see tubular poles. But if you go to Aba, there are bigger tubular poles that we've used to avoid any kind of issues going into the future. And then we built 105 kilometers of additional 33 kV line to ensure that to all these substations they get power reliably. So the whole intention is to address what Larry was talking about. You know, that you need to really invest. If you're coming to buy a distribution company and you don't have money to invest and you don't have technical competence, you have no business being there. Which addresses what my brother is saying. So, and it is the power plant, 188 megawatts is embedded. It doesn't supply to the national grid except excess power. It supplies power locally. That's the intention. If we do that in different economic clusters, we will begin to see success in the power sector in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. And it's brilliant that Senator Baribe and Honorable Asukwa are here because, like Simon said, you know, we're not in prison, so some of these things is not. We're not sworn to advocate a shrine, so we can revisit some of these issues. There was a question from Adaju on how to get the former minister to speak with the incumbent. Unfortunately, the current minister could not be here for other conflicts. He has to be in Lagos today. The PAMSEC was supposed to be here. We saved his seat for him, but something else came up this evening. However, there's a plan to ensure that these conversations continue outside here. There's a question on the reform design for Dr. Ola, the way it was designed and where we are today. What have you got to say?
I think that was the question.
From Nigeria.
Yes, the simple answer to the question is the sector we have today is not what we envisaged, and so it's far from it. There was extensive discussion at that time whether again it was politics and also interest being protected. The argument is very, very clear. As Ayo said, it's only 1% economics, 99% politics, 99% work on the economic side, 1% decision on the policy on the politician to say no, and that stops everything there. Now, what was quite interesting at that time was the arguments were presented to us. We worked with lots of consultants, not just within Nigeria, from outside the country as well. And the arguments were very, very clear. Nobody could argue against it, in principle. Basically, bilateral contracts. Willing buyer, willing seller sort of concept. We had an epic at that time, had to discuss in then NEPA, and there was vociferous opposition to that. Some people, because there were various arguments to prevent reform from going ahead, and every single step we took, there was another argument. And the argument at that time about the market design was that, oh, we don't have the competence to do this, to run this market, this design, and that we should have, let's go for single buyer. And what was quite curious to us at that time is that they say, moving to single buyer, let's forget all these fanciful names. NEPA was a single buyer. So that was not making any progress whatsoever. So it was just 5 steps forward and almost everything backwards. So that was a no-brainer. And I remember there was vociferous defense of the whole thing on the part of BP. And at the end of the day, we had to compromise. There was a compromise. Yeah. And we had a hybrid. And what we have today is a hybrid. It's neither fish nor meat. So that's why we're struggling. And as Ayo said, that once you go back and create that market, it's not market where you buy bread and stock fish and things like that. Basically, creating a notional market where supply and demand clear. And it's very, very important. And just to finish off, I don't think we need to do very much in terms of where to start and whether it is Aba, whether it's Lagos. If we take the law and implement the law as it is, you'll be surprised how much we'll achieve. It is not there were some changes that we know the areas, we know some of the issues that Ayo and I struggle day and night to try and explain to the National Assembly. Those are not the areas where we have a problem today. The problem is more in the market, and it probably comes down to lack of understanding of what the reform truly is all about. So it's not just about, because to most people, just like once we sell, it should be Nirvana. Private sector will come and change everything. Nobody asks enough questions. But you see, we have to at least assume, give them the benefit of the doubt. There was a process. Somebody, a judge said competent. But perhaps that's what you need to look at. It doesn't mean that you're saying we should throw everybody out, but if people are not performing, the regulation allows for you to deal with that. That's why we opted for performance-based regulation. We've drifted towards intrusive regulation, which is very costly and gets you nowhere. Until we come back to the drawing board and look at the legislation, the market rules in particular, the grid code, we have enough to make all these things work. What's perhaps missing is putting all these things together and a proper oversight function. Not in the sense of the National Assembly, by the way. You see, basically, somebody to make it work. And that's what's missing.
Excellent. There was a question on, thank you, round of applause. There was a question from the back, I think it was from David, about the challenges with raising capital. I think Ayo already alluded to some of those in his comments. But there was an important question on job creation. Because I remember when Professor Nadi was selling the privatization of us Nigeria, one of the things we heard was that once we did this thing, there will be jobs everywhere. So what are some of the ideas on how a reformed power sector could create these millions of jobs that Nigeria is looking for?
One problem we had when we came on board was that government had essentially ignored or totally neglected the issue of manpower development in the power sector. For about 16 years, neither NEPAD nor PACN employed a single engineer. We had to go to Mr. President and get a special dispensation to employ 1,000 engineers. But beyond that, we started what we call NAPSAS, National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme, because we were looking ahead at a time when the whole sector will have stabilized and there will be a total undersupply of manpower. So we trained 200 from every state of Nigeria, 7,400 young people in various arts in the power sector. So because we believe there will be an explosion. And what I'm now saying, and I keep harping on this whole situation, my brother said, embedded generation, that's a perfect model, but it's a gigantic model. I'm even looking at smaller units, 2 megawatts, 5 megawatts. There are going to be people who will run them. Where do you find the manpower? Even when you talk about, renewable energy, installation of solar panels, maintenance of solar panels, the battery components, the inverter components, all these things require manpower to do. So as the system becomes more buoyant, and as the government creates an enabling environment, and as these people who are busy collecting money and not sending it back to the generator or the TCN, learn to do what they ought to do, I believe there will be jobs all over the country.
And the last question was for you, the NERC ransom committee,
Yes.
and yes, now that you've had some time to think about it, was that the right decision?
I think that's too simplistic. I remember not long ago in the UK, a regular policeman stopped a car, and the car had the equivalent of the IG of police who was on the speeding. And at that point in time, it wasn't about the chief police officer of the UK. It was somebody who had committed an offense. Now, to ask the question that would you do it again is to somehow miss the point. The question is that what happened that led to the suspension, not removal, by the way, suspension. It would be very responsible on the part of the government if there were allegations, and substantial one for that matter, to shy away from it and say we will not look into it. And unfortunately, the politics protracted the resolution of the problem, and we know what happened afterwards. There was an allegation that had to be looked into, and government made a decision to look into it, which meant suspending the commissioners for that time to look into it, and then make a determination of the way forward. Unfortunately, the events were too close.
Okay, so thank you for that response. So I'm in a bit of a dilemma. We pride ourselves that we stick to time. We start at 6, we end at 8. I am tempted because this is kind of an August gathering. I'm not sure when next we're going to get all of them, and I still see some hands. But I crave your indulgence that let's just keep to tradition and end this at 8. But they will still be around, and we can still continue. We still got some drinks downstairs, so you don't have to leave. We can continue the conversation, but just permit us to keep to this tradition of ending this at 8 o'clock. And on that note, I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with us. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to spend it with us. But I want you to please join me in thanking most especially the panelists who agreed to come and share with us. I think that one of the reasons why the West does better than Africa is that when people finish in government, they have time to reflect and they write books. And we learn from those books and we don't repeat the same mistakes. So whilst we wait for them to write the book, we'll take what we've heard tonight and we'll put it together in a communique and share it with the current administration and hope that there are some lessons in there for them. We do this every third Wednesday of the month. In November, we hope that the topic is going to be a review of the Power Sector Recovery Program, third Wednesday. And for December, because most people shut down before the third Wednesday, I think we're going to have it on the 6th or the 8th, I'm not sure, we'll communicate. And it's going to be a debate. Different from this format, but a debate. Because the issues keep coming up, privatization, is it the right thing or not? So we're going to have a full-on debate on privatization and its place. And we hope you find time to join us for both the November and the December events. And you've been a great audience, and we thank you very much.